Hello, I'm Kim Chakanetsa, and this is The Conversation, a program where women have their say. Each week, two women with a common interest get together for a frank discussion. Women are still, on average, earning less than men across the world. That's according to the UN. Women in most countries earn between 60 and 75% of men's wages. It's referred to as the gender pay gap, and it's a mild phrase for an explosive issue that elicits all sorts of reactions ranging from red-hot rage to shock. Well, today on The Conversation, you'll hear from two women from Italy and Kenya about their experiences and their mission to change how women are viewed and valued in the workplace. With me in the studio is Paola Diana. She's the founder of PariMerito, Equal Merit. It's an organization which lobbied the Italian government to pass new equality laws in the workplace. She's also a businesswoman and the author of Saving the World: Women, the 21st Century's Factor for Change. And down the line in Nairobi is Dr. Njoki Ngumi. She is a medical doctor and creative leader in Kenya. She's head of learning and development at the HEVA Fund that invests in the creative economy. She holds the same title at the Nest Collective, which is a group of creators working in fashion, theatre and art in Nairobi. Very pleased to have you both here. Njoki, what do you think when you look at Kenya specifically, the pay gap? What is behind it?
There's the one-word answer, which is patriarchy, obviously, but then there's the wider conversation about who is allowed to make decisions. And so with the shifts in that will definitely come shifts in pay gaps. For as long as we are finding ways for women to make decisions, for women to be present when decisions are being made, and women who are feminists. It's not just about having women in seats of power. It's about having women who are not ashamed to have a feminist agenda, who say that I am here so that more women can come behind me, so that more women can gain because I'm sitting here, not just kind of to be a woman in a chair.
I want to go into the specifics a little bit because one of the arguments that's put forward is that it's also to do with the type of occupations women are in, that these tend to be more lower paid. Paola, do you agree?
Unfortunately, so women tend to be employed many part-time roles, especially because of the pregnancies. They don't let you have a career after that, and this is completely insane for me. So. And then, of course, there are many, many other jobs that are underpaid. And again, women are the first ones to get these jobs because there is a glass ceiling. It's still there. We have to really destroy the glass ceiling. Until we do that, women will always have lower paid jobs because this is the role. Until a certain point, you can reach that point, but then you can't really go up because these kind of roles are roles where you are nominated. So it's not only about meritocracy. Real meritocracy is still kind of an utopia. So many times it's more like, which school did you do, if you had your buddy, doing the school with you, which is your friend playing golf with you, which is the club you're going to. So many, many other factors are important. So the gender pay gap, it's really complicated, but again, transparency. We need transparency. So this is the only way to break this.
Well, Njoki, I want to talk about that women in senior roles thing, because I think when you look at, for example, board members, it tends to be drawing from a pool of people who you've worked with previously, and if there are no women in that pool, then it's sort of self-perpetuating. What do you think is the solution to that specifically?
Just getting somebody into the chair is the first battle out of several, because the minute you become a woman that then starts pushing for other women, the rest of the board will seek to ostracize you because they see you as a threat to them. And so it tends to be a lot easier for the women to just kind of lean towards, I'm here because of merit, I'm not here to push some sort of feminist agenda.
Paola, when you look at the Global Gender Gap Index, which measures gender inequality, Italy is ranked 118th out of 144 countries when it comes to women's economic participation. And that's really surprising to me because Italy is one of the most developed economies in the world. So why does it rank so low?
Because women in Italy, they're very well educated, but unfortunately, they're not economically and financially independent. And that's a tragedy, especially in the south of Italy. Basically, the south of Italy has female employment like 30% of the population. That is so low. It's like
30%.
30, yeah.
Wow,
it's
okay.
nothing really. If we think about, the European average is around 60. It's all cultural. So we have the patriarchal society in Italy that is very, very strong. We also have the Vatican in Italy, as you know, and the Catholic Church is very traditional. So they still see the family and the role of the woman in a very traditional way. So women are looked more like mothers who has to stay at home. But this is a picture that is not contemporary picture anymore, because unfortunately many marriages, they end up in divorce, and many women, they need to work because one salary is not enough in a family.
Okay.
So this is a huge problem for Italy.
Lots to unpick there, Paola, and I'll come back to you in a second. But Njoki, Kenya does significantly better than Italy on female economic participation. But according to the World Economic Forum, a Kenyan woman is paid roughly half what a man is paid for doing a similar job.
Sometimes you have to laugh at these things because they're so tragic. I worry about some of the statistics, especially because they lean more towards women in the formal sector, when the vast majority of women are either self-employed or work in the informal sector, which obviously are not as regulated as the formal one. So even if, for instance, the government, as they did, put out a directive for employers to have a space in the workplace where women can go and breastfeed their child, for instance, which is quite progressive, you might imagine. However, these directives don't really work for people that are self-employed or are informally employed or are employed on a more temporary basis. And so you find that the gap tends to be seen in places like those. I think for me as well, the idea of what is called work and who is considered a worker is a thing that we're just kind of trying to unpack as Kenyans. There's the whole idea of care labours and the idea of the woman's work in the home as being work that should be remunerated.
When you speak about informal employment in Kenya, does that tend to be the experience for women overall? Do they tend to be employed in the informal sector?
A minority of women are formally employed. The vast majority of people are either self-employed and doing like entrepreneurships, often at very small scale, or are informally employed. You will probably do a little job for somebody once in a while. The vast majority of the domestic care work sector, which is a huge employer for women in the country, that would be considered informal employment because there's no contracts that you sign. You're just in somebody's house doing their care labor, washing their clothes, taking care of their child. Even when the state says that we should have our minimum wage at such and such an amount, it's very difficult for them to enforce that minimum wage. And people know that.
Well, I want to talk about your experiences growing up. Paola, in Italy, what was your experience of gender inequality?
I was born in a very patriarchal and conservative family. My father was very Catholic, but was very rigid. So he was ruling like an autocrat, really. So I was the good girl if I was doing what he wanted me to do. And I was a bad girl, of course, if I wasn't doing that. And of course, I was doing that because I'm a rebel by nature. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, when I was young, I really broke the rules of the patriarchal society. And I decided to become a feminist, a strong feminist in a country where even politicians, women politicians, they are scared to use this word. Seriously. In Italy, the word feminism is kind of a bad word.
It's a dirty word, is it?
It's unbelievable, yeah.
Were you expected, Paola, to have a career? Did your father expect you to go out and have a career?
No, he was expecting me to study and to have a career, yeah. But of course, under his rules. So he was he was a control freak, let's say that.
Njoki, what was your experience growing up in Kenya?
For me, my mother was always a working woman. She's a doctor. And for me, the idea of being a woman, as far as intellectual engagement is concerned, that was never an issue at home. Like the times that I would be reminded that I'm a girl would always be odd little moments. So it would be like, you can't use public transport, but your brother can. I feel a lot of women have to go through a moment of grieving that they experience the world so differently and that the world is so hostile to them in ways that it can be much more welcoming for men.
Paola, how old were you when you started working?
I started formally working after my master's degree when I was 28, but this is because after my bachelor's degree, I sent out my CV to many companies at the time, and I didn't receive not even one response.
Why do you think that was?
Of course, because I wrote that I was married and I had 2 young children, because this is another problem in Italy. They don't hire mothers with young children, and they don't even hire women who are engaged or married. They might have children. So there is a huge discrimination in Italy.
Is that legal though?
It's not legal, but they just do that, again, because it's cultural, because in Italy it's very expensive to hire someone, especially with a regular contract, the ones who are regulated by the unions. And so companies, they prefer to hire men because they still work even if their wives have babies. Right. And that's also the reason why Italy is the oldest country in the world after Japan only. Can you imagine? So in Italy, women, they stopped having children, really literally stopped, because they don't feel secure, they don't have jobs, so how can they even think about having a family? Thank God I had the money to pay for a master's degree, and I started going to school again. And then one of my professors, he saw my value, and he asked me to work for the political campaign of the former Prime Minister, Mr. Prodi. So I was lucky.
It took a man to find you this position.
But he is a great man, an enlightened man, because men can be our allies, especially if they are enlightened. So if they understand the value of diversity, the value of women. So my idea of the word of feminism is that this is a fight we have to fight together, not only women.
Njoki, I'd like to bring you in here. Paola's struggles to get into the workplace after she had children. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, it's definitely true. There's a lot of stories here in Kenya about women who are discriminated against very directly, even in the interview process. They're going to ask you, when do you plan to have children? I was asked that when a mission hospital was interviewing me for an internship position. Like, I was barely out of university and they needed me to have my reproductive calendar already planned out. Because they were a mission hospital, what I told them was that it's God's will, right? Just to kind of be a little bit cheeky, because then nobody can question God's will. You know for sure that nobody is asking men questions like those.
Exactly.
So absolutely, as regards having small children, that the period between 0 and 5 for a child is very difficult because they're building an immunity, they're learning how to be alive in the world, and that involves getting sick very often. So that means you can be up getting dressed for work and your child starts having the runs in the worst way, or your child starts wheezing, and you can't leave them because you're the primary caregiver. Even when a man could be a pediatrician, the business of taking care of his sick child will still fall to his wife, who has probably less knowledge. But all of that being said, what Paolo said definitely is true about women in the workplace.
Let's just take a quick break. You're listening to The Conversation, and the question we are asking is, why do women earn less than men, and can anything actually be done about it? With me are 2 women trying to change attitudes to women in the workplace in Kenya and Italy. Njoki Ngumi is a former doctor and creative leader based in Nairobi, and Paola Diana is an entrepreneur and author who divides her time between Rome and London. Have you had any particular experiences, Njoki, in your career trying to make yourself heard or to have to navigate a tricky situation in the workplace?
When I was in medical practice, for sure, there were things that I wasn't allowed to say, or there were things when I said them, I would be told, oh, you're just being a feminist, as though it's all some sort of joke. Like, for instance, we'd be in theatre and then somebody would say something about the running nurse's body, and I would say, you really shouldn't talk to her like that. And then somebody would say, oh, so you're just being a feminist now, you're just standing up for the rights of all women. So it just becomes a position for you to be mocked. So the minute you put yourself on the line to speak for other women, deliberately, all the time it comes up. Whenever I speak on television panels, I'm often the only woman, and I usually dislike being the one person who has to come and introduce a gender lens. But if nobody else is doing it, then I have to be the one that does it. And then after that, I'll be accused of doing things with a gender agenda, as
well
though
done.
Patriarchy,
Keep doing
that. As though patriarchy itself does not have an agenda.
We have to do that. And also we have to explain people why there is a need to affirmative actions for women, because people, the majority of them, they don't really get it.
There are those who push against affirmative action in the sense that
Absolutely.
They feel that you are sometimes promoting women who don't deserve to be in that particular position, who are not qualified enough.
A good answer when they say that is that real equality will be reached when even women will have the right to be stupid, because we have so many mediocre and stupid men everywhere in position of power. So
Absolutely.
This is a real equality. Come on.
Okay, fair answer.
I really love it when people kind of bring up that meritocracy becomes an issue, because like we have all these stories of parliamentarians who are men who underperform and are still voted back in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then when a woman has a moment of underperforming or has a series of underperforming, like the viciousness against her is so great, as though we hold men to some high standard of merit that they all meet, which we know is not true. When Paola was talking, I remembered a very good friend of mine telling me about her daughter who goes to this kindergarten, and the kids were playing, and she noticed the boys are building robots, but the girls are arranging spoons on a tray. Wow. And so she went up to the teacher. She says, "What's going on?" And the teacher said, but the girls like it.
Yeah, the first stereotype.
And so the thing that we need to learn is that from the very beginning, the thing that we are socialized to be are so fundamentally different.
Njoki, I want to talk about the situation in Kenya with the parliament,
right.
Because you have a particular rule that no more than 2/3 of the same gender when it comes to the constitution of the parliament.
Absolutely.
But it hasn't been upheld. What's the situation there exactly?
So the thing with that rule, and I guess like our constitution is very aspirational. So we voted in a constitution that says no more than 2/3 should be of the same gender. The thing that has been a struggle has been the cultural conversation. A lot of people will call women leaders flower girls, be mocking about the sort of ornamental value that they have. So currently every single county has a women rep. That position is constitutionally given only to women. Then there's a very small handful of women who are governors or senators or members of parliament. At least during the last election, when we got a few governors who are women, that kind of shifted a little bit, and everybody's quite excited about that and keen to see what the new governors will do. But again, this conversation is not just about the end point, which is the election. It's about the party politics. It is about the engagement. How do we allow women to speak up during meetings in the village or meetings in our residential associations, so that we can get used to seeing women in leadership.
Paola, there is the motherhood penalty or the child penalty, which is the term for the economic and career setbacks that come when women have children. Women are still very much the primary caregivers, but men are starting to take a greater role. And I'm just wondering if one of the solutions is to enforce paternity care. Do you think that could work?
Absolutely. This is one of the solutions, because this will completely change the cultural horizon of men. Nowadays, men, especially in Italy, it's funny, but it's really sad. When they have to take care of their babies, especially if they're young, they say, "Oh, I'm doing babysitting now."
Yes.
This is so offensive. I think it was even my ex-husband used to say that. And I was like, no, you're just being a father. Yes. So they can't even understand, because for them it's normal that it's only the mother to take care of the child, or the mother or the grandmother, or anyway another woman. So this is the way men in patriarchal societies still see fatherhood and motherhood, and it's completely wrong. So in the future we need to share this role with men as well, and I think the horizons will be like more fluid. Men will have to take leave, paternity leave as well, and stay at home. And even the work should be flexible as the work of women, So everything should be shared. We can't tolerate this anymore. That is the woman only the one who has to wash the dishes, clean the house. Why is that? Who said that?
Njoki, could enforced paternity leave work in Kenya?
So we already have paternity leave. At the beginning, when a baby is born, a man is allowed to take 10 working days off, which adds up to 2 weeks. But I mean, you can't tell people how to spend their 10 days. So, and again, that only works for people who are in formal employment, because again, you can't tell an entrepreneur or an informal worker what to do, and they are the vast majority of the workforce in this country. So this idea of who is able and who is equipped to take care of a baby has to become a bigger conversation, and that men shouldn't feel like their manhood is being taken away when they're asked to take care of a baby. Again, we have to shift the ways in which we see things. There's a friend of mine who was taking care of his 3-year-old, and they were up and about on jaunts, and she needed a diaper change. But the only place that diaper changing stations are available are in the ladies. And so he had to ask himself, okay, what do we do to change this diaper conveniently? I need the ladies, but as a man, I can't go into the ladies even if it's with my daughter, do I give my child to a stranger to go and change her diaper in the ladies' room? Like, it becomes very complicated. And so we realize that life is designed to actively dissuade men from parenting. Unless the definition of masculinity expands to include nurturing, to include care. We have a huge conversation going on in Kenya about how a lot of younger women are told, you can't drive a car that's too big. You can't have a house that's too big. Otherwise, who will want to marry you? While a man is encouraged to go out and bring home any level of bacon, women are told you need a small cut. You need a cut that doesn't look like it's too ambitious, to just kind of mitigate your own resource collection so that you don't limit your choices for a life partner.
Of course, many people also think we need to protect the rights of women who choose not to work. Paola, do you respect women who choose to stay at home?
No, of course I respect them. I respect everyone. But it's not the way to being empowered. So the way to become an empowered woman is to become economically independent. That's the only way. So you need an education and you need a job. Of course, if then you're financially independent because, I don't know, you inherit a trust or whatever, you can also stay at home and just, manage your money. But this, we're talking about like the 0.0001 of the population. So yeah, women, in order to really gain power, they have to become economically independent.
If I, for example, chose not to work for a few years and just to earn much less or earn nothing during those years because I wanted to pursue a project or have children, so you feel that I wouldn't be empowered?
If you can do that for a few years and you have the resources, of course, to stay at home, it's perfectly fine. But it means that before you used to work and then after you want to go back to the market and you don't want to stay at home forever. But what I'm telling women is that it's much better if they think about earning their own money and having their own bank account, because there will come one day then maybe you will need that money. It will come a day maybe when you will find out that your partner is leaving you for maybe a younger one.
Yeah, because I think for me, the ability to not have to rely on anybody else, and I don't want to locate this necessarily on men, but also the idea of, as a daughter of a rich home, relying on that family to be able to give you money, because then it means you have to make them happy in order to keep having money. And that even in the most benevolent of spaces, where, for instance, a man can be beautiful and kind and wonderful to you, never making you lack anything, and that you can start to rely completely on that, and then something happens to him, his earning power goes down, you have to start taking care of him as well. The bad situations where somebody lets you down or somebody betrays you are far more common. But then, even in a society that has said we want to be able to stand for our women, we want all our women to stay home, we think this will be best for the raising of the children, we do have to realize that there are crises that arise that then need a woman to be able to step out into the market and earn money. You need skills that the market needs and that they demand. And so it becomes very tricky to tell somebody you can't stay at home unconscious about all of these things. And that back to the scenario that you raised about being able to stay home for 4 years, that is a privilege. It is a privilege to be able to stay home.
Exactly.
But then the privilege has to exist in a context that understands that the thing that enables you to stay home can be taken away from you. And so for me, that's the place where it's not the work of a man and it's not the work of a family, but for me, it's the work of a government.
We've been talking about all the problems and I just want to hear some solutions.
Yeah.
Paola, how do we fix this problem? How do we fix this gender gap? If you had a limited pool of money and you could focus on one thing, what would that be? Where would you apply your energies?
It's impossible to help women to get empowered with a limited amount of money. The thing that is more effective could be taxation, giving companies zero taxes for, I don't know, the next 5 years if they are going to employ a woman. And maybe for the next 10 years if they're going to employ a mother, a single mother, even more, Yes. So you really using taxation.
So tax incentives.
Yeah, tax incentives. These, I think, would be the most effective thing.
I think it's a really interesting idea, tax incentives. And Njoki, what's your one major idea?
I hate this idea of having to have one thing.
Sorry.
Because I guess exactly like Paolo said, there's no way to intervene on generations of systemic patriarchy with one solution. If I was forced to make one decision in Kenya, it would definitely be to uphold the rights and to professionalize and formalize our domestic work sector, which is primarily held up by women. If this cadre of women had to earn minimum wage or higher, if they had to get benefits, then it would make all the women who employ them a little bit more savvy around their own rights as relatively more privileged, and that they then start to understand what it means to be able to organize and to be able to push for the rights of women who are in a more formalized and professionalized workplace.
How optimistic do you feel about change happening when it comes to closing the gender gap? Paola, overall, do you feel optimistic?
I'm very optimistic because I see the pattern, I see history, and women are raising. We are the biggest change factor of this century, and who knows what we can do in the next one. So we are unstoppable right now. See the Me Too movement, see the Time's Up, association. This is the time women finally found their voices. Everywhere in the world, women are trying to break the chains that are keeping them down, So let's break these chains together. Let's break the ceiling together. Let's be united and united between us and with the enlightened man. And I'm sure we will reach the top. I'm sure 100%.
Okay, so very optimistic. Njoki?
I think I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. And the reason is that we're seeing more change for more privileged women first. For me, I think my caution would be that we have to be careful that the gains are felt by everybody, especially the people who don't usually feel gains. And so that would include people of color, people who are queer, etc., etc., etc. The more marginalized we are, the likelier it is that we suffer more. And so we need to push the gains all the way to be felt by every single person, not just by a few. But other than that, absolutely. I think the world is in an interesting place right now. There's a lot of people talking about Jupiter being in Libra, meaning justice for women. Many interesting conversations. Maybe the universe has been spinning towards this moment for a while.
Njoki and Paola, thank you so much for coming onto the conversation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
I've been talking about tackling the gender pay gap with the Italian entrepreneur and author Paola Diana and the Kenyan doctor and creative leader Njoki Ngumi. Don't forget the conversation is also available as a podcast, so you can download us to your device for free each week and carry us around with you, because you never know when you might want to listen. So search for BBC The Conversation wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Kim Chakaneta. Till next week.